What's up, sixth graders? This is Lesson 7, Day 5. So yesterday in Lesson 7, Day 4, you were being introduced to dividing mixed numbers. So today, you're going to be practicing more dividing mixed numbers. So what we're going to do first is I want you to follow along with this example here. So you don't have to write anything because it's all in your book. I'd rather you pay attention. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to erase what the book wrote. Voila, we're ready to go. So let's start by reading the problem. It says, Lydia bought 2.5 gallons of paint and used 1.5 gallons of paint. So this is what she bought, and this is what she used. And the question says, what fraction of the paint did she use? Now I'm going to draw a picture to help me understand this one here. So it says she bought 2.5 gallons. So here's 1 gallon. I'm going to split it in half. Here's 2 gallons. And this would be the 3rd gallon. But remember, we're only looking at the 2.5. So here's 2.5, right? Now it says she used 1.5 of it. Okay? So she used pretty much 1.5. Now the question says, what fraction of the paint did she use? So we need to figure out, if she used 1.5 gallons, what fraction of the paint of all 2.5 gallons did she use? Now, first thing, here's what I know. Okay, I know that the fraction of the paint she used, which I don't know, if I were to multiply that by the 2.5 gallons, I would get 1.5 gallons left. So let's think of that for a second. Okay, whatever fraction of the paint, remember, of means times, the fraction of the paint is 1.5 gallons, right? Now, anytime you have a multiplication problem with a missing factor, you can write a related division problem. So you start with a 1.5, and you work your way backwards, and you divide that by 2.5. And that should get our answer, our question mark. Okay, see what I did there? I reversed it and did division. Now, to solve that, I need to make sure that 1.5 and 2.5 are both improper fractions. So 1.5 is 3/2. And 2.5 is 5/2. So in red there is my division problem. Now to solve it, remember, all you have to do is multiply by its reciprocal. So I have 3/2 times, and the reciprocal of 5/2 is 2/5. Okay? So now that I solve that, 3 times 2 is 6, 2 times 5 is 10, and 6/10 reduces to 3/5, which is my answer. And if you notice down here, it says Lydia used 3/5 of the paint that she bought. Okay, so why was this one kind of tricky? It's because kind of hard to understand, first off, if that's even a division or multiplication problem when you read the problem. But what I did to help me understand is I kind of drew a picture first that helped me understand it a little bit. Then I wrote a multiplication problem to help me see. So the fraction of the paint is 1.5. I reversed it to get my division problem. I made sure they were improper fractions. Then I multiplied by the reciprocal, got my answer, and simplified. Okay, there's a lot going on in there. All right, so now let's go down and we are going to try one. So we're going to kind of work on 26 together a little bit. So first off, let's read it. It says, Lexi has planted seeds in 3/5 of the garden. She used 1/2 pound of seeds. That's what she used. And the question says, how many pounds will she use for the entire garden? Okay, so as we go over this one, I want you to kind of draw a picture with me, because this one is tricky to understand. Now, the other thing I want to focus on is this dude over here. It says, will the answer be less than 1 or greater than 1? Why? So we'll talk about that once we get a picture drawn. So if Lexi has planted seeds in 3/5 of the garden, let's start by drawing her garden as a rectangle. And remember, if I go too fast, pause until you get caught up. Now we're going to split that into fifths. Hopefully your rectangle is nicer than mine. And then we will shade 3/5 of it. So let's shade 1/5, 2/5, 3/5. Okay, so get caught up. And remember that 3/5 that's shaded is the 3/5 of the garden that she planted seeds in. Now let's do some labeling of some numbers. Okay, so you ready? First off, here's what we know. She has planted seeds in 3/5 of the garden. So that purple shaded section is a 3/5 of the garden. And she used ½ pound of seeds. So in this 3/5 of the garden, she used ½ pound of seeds. I'll even put an LB underneath it. Now the question says, how many pounds will she use for the entire garden? So what we need to figure out, if she used half in that section, we need to figure out in this entire garden how many pounds of seeds she will use. We don't know that. So take a second to get this drawn. Now, here's where this dude's going to help us understand this. Because that way, if let's say we do the wrong math problem and we get an answer that isn't in the ballpark, we'll know we're wrong. He says, will the answer be less than 1 or greater than 1? So here's what I want you to think about. We need to figure out the seeds used in the whole garden, but we know to go from here to here, we already used ½ pound, right? So we have to figure out what was used here. If you add that on to half, is it going to be more or less? Well, it's going to be less, because half is already more than half of the garden. So we only have a small part of the garden left to go. So that part that's left to go is going to be less than half. And if we add a half with a number less than half, it's going to be less than 1. So here's what that means. If our answer when we do this is not less than 1, that means we did the wrong math problem. All right, so anyway, let's bear back with me here. So it says, here's what we know. In the garden, when she did 3/5 of the garden, or 3/5 of however many seeds she used for the garden, which we don't know, would get ½ pound of seeds. Right? Think about that. So 3/5 of whatever this whole amount of seeds is, which we don't know, is ½ pound of seeds. Now, get that problem written down, because we're going to take that 3/5 of question mark equals ½ pound, and we're going to break that down. So first off, remember, of means times. And I'm going to get rid of the pounds. So now, to figure out whenever we have a multiplication problem with a missing factor, we just use division going reverse to get our answer. So we start over here, and we have to divide by 3/5, and that's going to get us our answer. Okay, see if that makes sense, and get caught up. Now remember, if our answer is not less than 1, we know we did something wrong. If our answer is more than 1, right? Okay, so now let's start by solving this sucker. Actually, you know what I want? I want you to pause the video, and I want you to solve this division problem completely by yourself. When you're done, restart the video and see if you're right. Go. Okay, so let's see how you did. So first off, half divided by 3/5. Did you first change it to half times the reciprocal 5/3? Still with me? Then, did you solve? 1 times 5 is 5. 2 times 3 is 6. And yes, 5/6 is less than 1. So the solution, remember, we have to figure out how many pounds will she use for the entire garden. She will use 6 pounds of seed for the entire garden. All right, so remember this in this pair share. How did you and your partner decide which fraction is the dividend and which is the divisor? So remember, when we set it up as half divided by 3/5. If you set it up as 3/5 divided by half, you would have gotten the wrong answer. So how I decided was, when I drew the picture, I wrote the related multiplication problem, and that's how I found the order. All right, so however you decide, that's sometimes what you got to do, because these are tricky, even for me, and I'm your math teacher. All right, so now here's what you are going to do. You are going to start, we'll read 27, then I'm going to have you solve it. All right, so 27 says, a marathon is 131/5 miles long. It's kind of odd to have it as an improper fraction, but so be it. All right, so the marathon's that long. If 4 people divide up the distance equally, how many miles does each person need to run? So 4 people are dividing up the distance equally. How many miles does each person need to run? All right, so your job is to answer that question. Now, I will tell you, when I do it, I'm going to be doing a math problem. I'm not going to draw a picture for this one. If a picture helps you, you can do that. Also, because they gave you a number to start with that's an improper fraction, you can actually leave your answer as an improper fraction for this one. You don't have to change it to a mixed number. Okay, anyway, pause the video, do 27. As soon as you're done, restart it. Go. Okay, let's see how you did. So first off, here's what I know. The marathon is 131/5 long, and it's being split or divided by 4 people. Okay, now I also know that you can write 4 as a fraction. So 4 is the same as 4/1. Now, to divide by 4, we're going to multiply by the reciprocal. So what we're going to do is 131/5 times 1/4. Now up here, let's answer this question. So dividing by 4 is the same as multiplying by what number? So dividing by 4 is the same as multiplying by 1/4, because 1/4 is the reciprocal of 4/1. All right, so now you solve it. 131 times 1 is 131. 5 times 4 is 20. So, like I said, you can leave that, since they gave you an improper fraction to start with. So you can say 131/20 miles. Now, I am not going to leave it that way, because that doesn't help me. Like, what the heck is 131/20? So what I'm going to do is divide 131 divided by 20. Remember, I'll do a little counting by list to help me. 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120, 140. So 20 goes 6 times, which is 120. Subtract, I get 11. And remember how to do this. The number up here, my quotient, is my whole number. Okay, the remainder is my numerator. And the 20 is my denominator. So this number I understand a little bit more. So each person runs 6 11/20 miles. So that's a little over 6.5 miles. All right, so now I want you to think of this one. This says, how is this problem different from the others you've seen in this lesson? Well, the one thing that sticks out to me is they gave us an improper fraction. All the other ones, they give you a mixed number. Okay, I don't know if you can think of other ways it's different, but that's what's different to me. I haven't seen one of those. Okay, so remember, pause the video if you need to make any corrections, but we're moving on to 28. Now, in 28, I don't want you to answer this question down here yet. We'll write that in a second. But what I do want you to do is, it says, which of the following problems can be solved by finding 4 divided by 2/3? Now, what I want you to do is when you read through A, B, C, and D, don't just guess it real quick. I want you to think through this. So each one of these is like a mini problem. So I want you to write down what math problem would you do to solve each of those 4 problems. Only one of those should you do 4 divided by 2/3. All right, so you're going to pause the video, go through each one of the choices, and then we'll see if you're right. Okay, pause it, restart it when you're done. Go. Okay, so let's see how you did. So I'm going to go through each of my 4 choices here. So A says 4 people equally share 2/3 of a pizza. How much of the pizza does each person eat? So if I were solving that problem, I would say you're taking 2/3 of a pizza and it's being shared or split by 4 people. Is that the problem up there circled in red? No, it's the reverse of the numbers. So it is not going to be A. Now B says, how many 2/3 cup servings are there in 4 cups of soup? So we're trying to figure out how many 2/3 there are in 4. So if I were doing that, I would have 4 cups and I would be splitting it into 2/3, which actually is this. So right now I'm thinking it's B, but I'm never sure with problems like this, so I'm going to check C and D. All right, C says a pie recipe requires 2/3 pounds of apples. How many apples are needed for 4 pies? So let's think about it. If it's a pie recipe, if you can imagine, here's your pie, and it requires 2/3 pounds, but you've got 4 pies. Each one of those 4 pies is going to require 2/3 of a pound of apples, right? So in this one, you would be doing 2/3 pounds times 4 pies. And that's not the problem circled in red because that's a division problem, and this is multiplication. So it is not C. So let's check out D. A family ate 2/3 of, I know what that means, a 4-foot sandwich. How much did they eat? Well, of means times, right? So that would be 2/3 times 4, which again, since it's multiplication, it is not the answer. So B is the correct answer. So if you had that one, awesome. But now, here's your last thing you're going to do. Now is where you are going to answer this question, okay? Arthur chose A as the correct answer. How did he get that answer? So remember, Arthur said A was correct and that matched this problem. Now I have in purple what the problem actually was. That's how we knew it wasn't A. So pause the video, write what you think Arthur did, and restart it when you're done. Go. All right. So here's what I'm going to write. And this, you don't have to match mine in this one, but here's what I'm thinking. So remember, this is the problem that would have solved it. 2/3 divided by 4 people. But Arthur thought that it was 4 divided by 2/3. So my guess is when Arthur reads it, that he just saw the 4 first in the problem and the 2/3 second, so he did 4 divided by 2/3. That's my guess. But that might be totally different from what you think. So I'm going to say, I think Arthur just wrote the numbers in the same order they were written in the sentence. And I bet some of you guys did the same thing as Arthur. All right, now the question down here, the pair shared, does Arthur's answer make sense? No, think about it. Arthur, like, this would be saying that 4 people are split into groups of 2/3. That makes no sense. The pizza is being split by 4 people. All right, so that definitely wouldn't make sense. All right, guess what? You are done with me. You're done with this lesson. So you can always pause it, go back, make any corrections. But, as always, thanks for watching.